Dramatist Guild format. State standards HS1.T.CR1.A create roles, imagined worlds, and improvise stories in a theatrical work, and HS1.T.CR2.A collaborate with peers as the actor, director, playwright, designer, etc. in preparing or devising theatrical work. Much like the MLA or APA formats you may be required to use to write essays in your English classes, Dramatist Guild format is a standard set of rules for how a finished manuscript of a play will look. These rules govern where each element of a script should be placed so that anyone who reads the script will know where to look to find certain information. In Dramatist Guild format, readers can expect to find a title page that identifies the play that they are reading, a synopsis page which gives them a general idea of what to expect, and the content pages where the actual play is held. On the title page, readers can expect to find the name of the play about halfway down the page in the center of the page in all capital letters. On the next line down would be the byline. Byline is a term that applies in theater manuscripts and screenwriting manuscripts and in journalism. Anytime you get a writer credit, that's a byline. It gets its own line on the page, and that's the author's name or authors' multiple name, all grouped together. Those are also centered under the title, and those are going to follow standard capitalization rules. If the play is adapted from a different work, like for example, a play that is adapted from a fairy tale or a play that is adapted from a book or a movie, then you have to acknowledge the source material. It would be like plagiarism in an English class if you were not to acknowledge that. So you're going to put that acknowledgement also centered right underneath the byline, and that's going to follow standard spelling and capitalization rules as well. You also need to know how to get in touch with the author. So plays are frequently submitted to competitions or to publishers or to producers, and if a company is going to pick up a play for production or for publication, they have to know how to get in touch with the author to avoid violating copyright, because they would have to pay them to produce or publish their work. So that contact information goes on the very bottom of the page, and it can be either right or left justified, just not in the center of the page. Here you can see an example title page from one of my scripts. This one is called Snake Oil. Notice that the title is centered in all capital letters. On the next line down, there's the byline. So it's written by me, by Lauren Street. So that's what I put. Capital B for by, capital L for my first name, capital S for my last name. On the next line, I give an adaptation credit because I didn't come up with the idea for this story. I'm adapting it from something else. So this one in particular happens to be adapted from Dr. Faustus by Johann von Goethe. If you don't know the name of the original author, you can just put the title. So for example, adapted from Cinderella, adapted from a Native American folktale, adapted from whatever. But if you know the author, you should put the name of the author. Then, down at the bottom, I need whoever I'm submitting this to be able to get in touch with me. For our class, you're going to put my class period and the high school's address, but if you were submitting this for real, you would put your own name, email address, your mailing address, your phone number, however you prefer that people get in touch with you to ask for publication rights and royalties. The second page is a synopsis page, and this is where you get some basic facts about the play. Typically, you're going to get things like a character list and some information about the setting. So you would list all the characters in the order that they appear in the script, as well as the gender if it matters, sometimes it doesn't, and the age if it matters, again, sometimes it doesn't. So for example, if it is very important that my character is an old woman, and it has to be an old woman, then I need to list that as elderly or give a specific age, as well as listing her as female. But if the character is a fox, a talking fox, and it doesn't really matter if that's a talking girl fox or a talking boy fox, You can either list that as male/female or leave the gender off entirely, or specify that this is a non-gendered role. And if the age doesn't matter, if it can be a fox in his 40s or a fox in her teens, as long as it's a fox creature, you can either say age non-specific or leave the age off entirely. But all the character names are going to be listed in the order that the character appears in the story, and they're going to be left justified. Underneath that, you're going to include some information about where the play takes place. If there's more than one location, you would list all of those in the order that they appear in the script. You are going to make the heading for your setting in all capital letters and then justify to the left all of that information. Here you can see that I've got an example synopsis page. So I give it a title in the center in all caps, cast of characters. And I'm going to list all of my characters left justified, the character names are capitalized, and give you a little bit of information about who they are. I only have to list their gender and their age if it matters. But I also like to give just a little bit of information about who these characters are to each other personally. So Birdie is mid-60s and a faith healer. Zeke is her mentally handicapped grandson in his 20s, Evelyn is her teenage granddaughter, and Ryder is in his 30s and a stranger. But notice I don't list a gender for Birdie or for Ryder. It doesn't really matter if those characters are male or female, so I leave them off entirely. Birdie could be a male character, Ryder could be a female character. I do use pronouns that gender them in the script, but because I leave that off, I also put a note when I submit this that those two are gender non-specific characters, they could be played by males or females. The setting is a shack on Yellow Creek outside Dixon, Tennessee in June of 1933. So that gives you some information about what the set design of this play might look like. Then, after we've got all of that introductory information out of the way on page 1 and page 2, on page 3, we're going to begin the actual script. We have to start with a scene heading so that we can keep up with which act and which scene we are in at all times. If you're writing a play that only has one act, one scene, you still need to list that, Act 1, Scene 1. However, if you are writing something with multiple scenes or multiple acts, it's vital that you include a scene heading so that the reader can keep straight where they are in the story. That is going to be in the center and in all capital letters. Stage directions are anything that the actors are supposed to do but not say on the stage. So we put those right justified and we put them in italics, and they will never ever cross the center line. So they will only ever be put on the right hand side of the page, starting at about the 3-inch mark if you're using the ruler in Microsoft Word. Starting about there, they stay on the right side of the page in a column format and they're italicized. Character names let the reader know who's talking, and they also make it easier for actors to know when they have their next line, to find when they have lines. So we put them on a line by themselves, centered in all capital letters, and then their dialogue, which is what the characters are saying, goes on a new line directly underneath the character names, and those are left justified. So here's an example script page. So I start with my scene heading centered at the top. Notice I've got some stage direction to start us off. All of that is stuck on the right side of the page. It does not cross over the center line, and it is italicized. All of my character names are in the center on a line by themselves in capital letters, and then everything that they say, or in Birdie's case, sing with her first line there, is left justified, and it can go all the way across the page if it wants to. Then if you look down toward the bottom, you can see that there's another stage direction. It starts on a new line. Character names are going to be capitalized there, and that is going to stay to the right side of the page in italics. Now, when you go to write your dialogue, remember, most people don't speak in complete sentences, and the way people use grammar can tell you a lot about your character. If you look back at the slide that has all of the dialogue on it, you'll notice that Zeke says, "You got a pretty singing voice, Birdie." Now, "you got" is incorrect grammar, but that tells you something about this character. "You got a pretty singing voice." And then Birdie follows that up with, "I ought to made records and got rich." This is telling us really fast that these characters don't have a lot of formal education. So the way you use grammar tells the audience a lot about your character. If you want your character to sound very intelligent, make sure you use correct spelling and grammar. If you do not want your character to sound intelligent, it is okay to break grammar rules in a script, but just understand that your character's intelligence is impacted by the way they use grammar. There's also going to be slang that changes based on the character's geography and their age. Characters who are from the southern region of the United States, for example, are more likely to call carbonated beverages Cokes than sodas. If they're characters from the Midwest, they might call it pop instead of soda. So just watch out for those regionalisms. And there's age-based slang as well. There are slang words that your generation uses that my generation would not necessarily use, that my grandparents' generation would not necessarily use. My grandparents, for example, to say something was uncool, was lame, they would call something square. "He's such a square." We wouldn't say that in my generation. In my generation, if somebody was not cool, we would say they were lame. God, that's so lame. The students that I'm currently teaching when I'm recording this in 2021 might call it something cringy. That's so cringy. That's so cringe. To refer to something being uncool, right? So watch out for those regionalisms and those generational slang terms.